Before everything fell apart, life was simple. Some might even call it boring. I had a steady routine that brought a sense of comfort and security, with predictable days filled with work, home life, and the occasional outing. Asher and I had been together for years. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was familiar. We had our ups and downs, but no matter what, we always found our way back to each other. I can still remember when things started to shift, gradually, almost like a fog rolling in. I began to feel restless, questioning if this was really all that life had to offer. The spark in our marriage dimmed, and I began noticing things I hadn't before. Asher seemed distant, lost in his work, and I felt more like a roommate than a wife. That emptiness slowly started to gnaw at me. People often say my job is dull. Being a CPA in charge of an audit team means I spend my days combing through the finances of businesses and individuals. When the IRS launches an investigation, we dive deep into the books, sometimes spending weeks on the task. While the work is usually pretty straightforward, today's surprise didn't come from the audit. It came from what I saw outside my office window. For the last 3 weeks, my team and I have been auditing Landmass Development Group, which is currently under investigation for contract mismanagement and fraudulent invoicing. This is the second time the state has accused them, and I'm not sure we can save them this time. My team includes 3 sharp computer analysts, Ethan, Sophia, and Ava, who can uncover anything hidden in the data. Then there are our 2 tireless accountants, Olivia and Benjamin, who are thorough and refuse to tolerate any dishonesty. My role is to manage the client relationship and put together the final audit report. Landmass provided us with impressive office space, complete with stunning city views and every piece of equipment we could need. My office, located at the far end of the 21st floor, belonged to a managing partner on leave. It's an extravagant space, filled with dark wood furniture, antique pieces, and even a stuffed marlin hanging on the wall. It gave me a glimpse into how Landmass spends its money. During a break, I found myself gazing out the window at the office building across the street, where Enterprise Research and Development is located. James works there. While I couldn't see inside her office from where I sat, I knew she was on the 20th floor. Eventually, I spotted her window but couldn't make out anything through it. That's when I noticed the large brass telescope sitting in the corner of the office. I adjusted it and focused it on James's office. Now I could clearly see her, sitting at her desk. My mind wandered, thinking about James at home, smiling down at me before slipping out of the black silk negligee I'd bought her in Paris. Just then, my phone rang, snapping me back to the Landmass audit. "Hello," I answered. "Hey boss," Benjamin said. "Want to grab lunch with us? Ethan found this little cafe nearby that might become our go-to spot. Are you interested?" "Thanks, Benjamin, but I've got a few calls to make. Could you bring me a tuna salad sandwich and a soda? Maybe tomorrow?" "Sure, but just don't forget to take breaks and leave at a reasonable hour." "We will. Thanks, Benjamin." After hanging up, I turned back to the telescope. This time, I noticed that James wasn't alone. A man from her Christmas party, Ethan, was leaning against her desk. I didn't like how much time he was spending with her, but she'd brushed it off, saying he was a boss she needed to impress to advance. I didn't think much of it until now. I watched as they spoke, appearing to discuss work, but then Ethan closed her office door and pulled a chair closer to her. James placed her feet, still in stockings, on his knees, and he began massaging them. My heart raced. I thought I was the only one who did that for her. He kept moving his hands up her legs. James leaned back in pleasure as he massaged her calves, even parting her knees. "What's going on?" I muttered to myself. James seemed to enjoy every moment of it. Suddenly, she flinched, said something to him, but he didn't stop. My heart pounded in my chest as I paced around the room. Finally, I grabbed my phone and called her office. When she answered, her voice was as sweet as ever, as though nothing unusual was happening. "I just wanted to tell you I love you." I struggled to keep my voice steady. "That's so sweet. I love you too," James replied warmly. "I was just thinking about you and can't wait to see you tonight." I tried to keep things casual. "I can't wait either, but I'm a bit tied up right now." Can I call you after lunch? Her tone shifted slightly, distracted. Sure. Enjoy yourself. Bye. I forced myself to hang up, then watched as James ended the call with a flick of her finger, unknowingly giving me the same gesture with her actions. She leaned back in her chair, lost in the arms of another man, all while I helplessly watched from across the street. My world seemed to shatter. The last thing I saw was James straightening her skirt and kissing him. I must have collapsed because, when I opened my eyes, Benjamin was beside me, concern etched on her face. Boss, what happened? Olivia was calling for help. Benjamin's voice was urgent. I don't know. I think I passed out. I muttered, still disoriented. Just relax. The paramedics are on their way. Benjamin squeezed my hand in reassurance. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of James's betrayal, and started to cry. Benjamin stayed by my side, offering silent comfort, but the tears wouldn't stop. Soon, I heard voices as the paramedics arrived. They checked my vitals, put an oxygen mask on me, and began their routine. Hello, Mr. Wilson. Can you tell me what happened? One of the firemen asked in a calm, professional voice. I was just looking out the window, and everything went black, I replied, trying to steady my breath. Have you been under a lot of stress? Your blood pressure is very high, the fireman noted. Well, yes, no, I stammered, unsure of what to say. How do you feel now? He asked. I'm okay, I lied. I guess I should have started that blood pressure medication. Sir, can you help me sit up? I'll take your pressure again. He assisted me in sitting up on the couch and took another reading. It was still high, but a little better. I insisted. I don't want to go to the hospital. Do you think you'll be okay now? The fireman asked cautiously. I'll be fine. I'll call my doctor. Thanks. Thanks for being there, I said, trying to sound more convincing than I felt. Once the paramedics left, I slouched on the couch, with Benjamin still holding my hand. I tried to muster a smile, but it felt forced. Are you going to be okay? Benjamin asked gently, her face full of concern. I'm not sure. I think I'll take the rest of the day off, I replied, my voice flat, feeling completely drained, both physically and emotionally. I don't think that's a good idea, Olivia interjected, her voice firm as she stood by the window. You're not going anywhere until you tell us what's going on. We're your friends, Asher. Now, tell us everything. Ethan, Sophia, and Ava were all gathered around now, looking at me with their worried eyes. Nothing happened. I just passed out, I muttered weakly, trying to brush it off. That's a load of crap, Olivia shot back, pointing toward the telescope by the window. What did you see through that thing? The question hit me like a ton of bricks, and all the dread and panic I had been trying to ignore rushed back, making it hard to breathe. Asher, take a breath, Benjamin whispered, trying to calm me down. Whatever it is, we're here for you. No, it won't be okay, I mumbled, my body shaking as the realization of what I had witnessed began to sink in. Olivia moved to sit beside me on the couch, wrapping her arm around my shoulders. Benjamin did the same on the other side, both of them trying to offer some comfort. Ethan, go grab some ice and water, Olivia instructed, never losing control of the situation. Sophia stepped up to put the in-conference sign on the door, signaling we were in serious business. Ava, grab some extra chairs. We need to have a team meeting, Olivia said, as she took charge. Before I knew it, we were all sitting in a circle. Benjamin and Olivia kept their arms around me, offering silent support as Benjamin handed me a glass of water with ice. Olivia gently turned my face toward hers. All right, Asher. No more dodging. What exactly did you see? She asked, her tone soft but determined. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I told them everything, every detail of what I had seen, no matter how painful. By the end of it, I was too drained to shed any more tears. I just sat there, staring at my hands, my mind reeling from the mess my life had become. What do you want to do now, Asher? Olivia asked quietly, her voice full of understanding. I loved James so much, and I didn't want to lose her. But seeing what I did through that telescope changed everything. Now I need the truth about our marriage. Guys, I'm in deep, but I don't want to drag you into this, I said, my voice low, filled with conflict. But Asher? Ava cut in, locking eyes with me. We're more than just colleagues. We're your friends. We've got your back, all the way. We're in this together, even if it gets ugly. Exactly, Benjamin added, her tone firm and reassuring. You might feel like everything's falling apart right now, Olivia said. But as long as you've got friends, there's still hope. We'll stand by you no matter what. Just lead us like you always do. The room went silent for a moment as I thought to myself, I need to know everything, the truth. Only then can I figure out what to do next. I need to know everything, I finally said, my voice shaking. Who? How long? How many times? Why? Why did she do this? Is it something about me? I can't even tell what's real anymore. Olivia gave me a steady look. You've always been a stand-up guy, Asher, and a true friend to us. We'll help you get to the bottom of this. No matter what, we'll be here for you. We need a plan, Benjamin said, taking charge. Ethan, Sophia, Ava, focus on what's happening at James's work. Olivia and I will handle the personal side of things. Let's regroup at 4 o'clock, she said, setting the schedule. Asher, go lie down in my office, she suggested gently. Stay away from that telescope for now. You've seen enough. I laid down on Benjamin's couch, but my mind was still a whirlwind of thoughts, all centered on James with that man, the horrible images replaying in my mind over and over again. At 4 o'clock, Sophia came in to tell me the team was meeting in my office. I've always liked Sophia. Quiet, but wise beyond her years. I thought to myself. She took my hand and led me down the hallway. Back in my office, Olivia took charge of the meeting, jotting down notes as the team laid out the steps we would take to uncover James's secrets. It felt surreal, like we were plotting some sort of covert operation, but I didn't say anything. I mostly listened while the team discussed the plan in detail. When the meeting was over, everyone scattered to handle their parts of the job. As usual, my role was to pretend to be busy, handling the superficial tasks like signing off on credit card purchases for office supplies. Asher, can you go home tonight? Benjamin asked, her voice softer than before. I don't think I can face her, I muttered, barely able to look her in the eye. I'll stay here until she's asleep, Benjamin said. Then I'll sneak in. I don't trust myself not to say something I'll regret. Could you take a business trip? She suggested, her brow furrowed with concern. Maybe. I need to come up with an excuse to avoid her this weekend, I said, lost in thought. If you need a place to stay, you can use our guest room, she added, trying to offer a bit of comfort. I stood at the window, staring through the telescope at James's empty office, the haunting images I'd witnessed still fresh in my mind. I left the office after 9 o'clock and drove home late, thankful to find James already asleep. I quietly prepped my clothes for the next day, showered without disturbing her, and slept in the guest room. I left before dawn, unable to face her, and arrived at the landmass office before anyone else. I made myself a cup of coffee but kept my distance from the telescope. By 9 o'clock, I checked in on Sophia, who was deeply focused on her computer. She smiled at me but didn't say much. Around 10 o'clock, Ethan showed up with boxes of equipment. Without a word, he began setting up a new, high-tech telescope that connected to a computer monitor, allowing me to read James's emails with crystal clarity. As he worked, Ethan explained that, thanks to Sophia's hacking skills, we'd soon have full access to James's work network. No more need for the telescope. Ethan also set up a 60-inch monitor and placed a big red button on my desk. Press it, Ethan instructed. I hesitated for a moment before I complied. The second my finger hit the button, the screens flickered, and fake audit data replaced the real images, hiding our activities from anyone who might walk in. Satisfied, Ethan gave a nod and left, just as the lunch hour was approaching. Olivia and Benjamin arrived shortly after, taking over the computer linked to the telescope. They focused on James's office, where an older man with white hair had just entered. A knot tightened in my stomach. I feared he might be there for the same reason as the man before him. Benjamin glanced at me, concern etched on her face. Asher, maybe you should take a break. Go to my office for a while. You might not want to watch this, she suggested gently. I don't want your blood pressure spiking again, I said, my voice hoarse. I didn't respond verbally. I just got up, walked out, and left them to it. An hour later, Benjamin joined me at her desk where I was idly playing blackjack, trying to distract myself. She slipped her arms around me, resting her head on my shoulder in an attempt to comfort me. Benjamin, I'm torn, I admitted. I don't want to know, but I need to know. Did anything happen? I looked at her, my heart already sinking as she nodded. What happened? I asked quietly, barely able to form the words. She hesitated, then spoke softly, almost too softly to hear. BJ. The weight of that one word hit me like a hammer to the chest. In an instant, I was unraveling again. We recorded everything, Ethan said, his voice cutting through the air. Just in case you need it later. Maybe for a lawyer. His words barely registered as my mind swirled with images of James. But I strongly suggest you don't watch it, he added, his tone gentle but firm. It'll only hurt more. Let's get you something to drink. Benjamin gently guided me back to my office, which had transformed into something resembling a war room. Several monitors now displayed various angles from across the street. Sophia was the first to speak. This is a live feed from security cameras on the 20th through 24th floors, she explained calmly. We can see nearly everything, except for bathrooms and some manager offices. We control the cameras, and we can record whatever we need. Ethan called me over. You're watching your wife now. She's working on an email, nothing significant. But I'm also downloading all her emails from the last 5 years. Her schedule is synced with her phone, so I copied that too. Their security is terrible. I sank into my desk chair, feeling the weight of it all crash down on me. Just as I was about to breathe, my phone rang. Quiet, Ethan instructed, his voice suddenly serious. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. Go on, boss, I said, not fully prepared for what was about to happen. Hello? Came James's voice, sounding casual and sweet, completely unaware of what I had just seen. I glanced up at the screen, noting her sitting alone at her desk. Hey, what's up? I asked, trying to sound as nonchalant as possible. You worked late last night. I missed cuddling with you, she said, the longing in her voice unmistakable. Are you going to be late again tonight? I asked, feeling the knot tighten in my stomach. I couldn't face the truth, so I lied, she replied. Probably this audit is just tough, and I might have to help my dad with some plumbing this weekend. I let out a soft sigh, pretending to be disappointed. Sorry. I was hoping for some one-on-one time. She sighed too. I bought a new outfit, and I wanted you to be the first to see it. Maybe next weekend, I said, the words coming out of my mouth like a lie. Sounds nice. Let's plan something special, she replied, her voice softening. Okay. Love you, I said, trying to make it sound sincere despite the weight in my chest. She didn't say I love you back. The silence hung between us for a moment, before she ended the call. I watched her hang up, noticing this time she didn't give me the finger. It struck me that she hadn't been with anyone else while we talked. Just then, Ava burst into the room, her energy completely different from the heavy air that surrounded us. Someone bring up the second camera partition, she exclaimed excitedly, tossing me my keys. I just finished wiring your house for pictures and sound. We can now monitor everything that happens there. Yeah, neat, I replied flatly, unable to share in her enthusiasm. Felt like the last thing I needed right now. The rest of the day passed in a blur as everyone worked at their computers, likely dividing their attention between James's movements and the ongoing audit. I hoped they were still focusing on the audit, I thought to myself. One by one, my team members said good night and left. Benjamin was the last to go. Asher, you should go out and eat something, she suggested, standing by my desk. Don't drink too much, but do something to take your mind off things. Maybe see a movie. I nodded, appreciating her concern, though I didn't know how to handle it. Tomorrow's Friday, and I'll be in early to finish my part of the audit, I said. Get away this weekend. Think about what you want to do. We'll talk Monday. Just remember you're not alone. You've got friends. Good night. After she left, I sat there trying to process everything. I jotted down possible solutions with their pros and cons, but the emotional weight was too much. In the end, I left the paper on the desk and went home around midnight. I took Benjamin's advice and went out for a meal, but I couldn't stomach much of the steak I'd ordered. When I got home, James was already asleep. Quietly, I packed clothes for the weekend, showered, and slept in the guest room. I left before she woke up, trying to avoid any confrontation. At the office, I watched James arrive through the telescope. She had her usual coffee and bagel, reviewing her schedule. At noon, I noticed the words all four written on her calendar. Dread filled me. Given her recent lunchtime activities, I had a bad feeling about it. Despite the team's concerns, I decided to keep watching. I gathered everyone for a quick meeting. I can't take this much longer, I said, voice strained. I'm going to watch today alone if possible, but someone should stay nearby in case I don't handle it well. This weekend I'll figure out what to do. But if things get bad, I want you far from the fallout. No arguments on that. Also, we need the audit done by next Friday, and all this equipment gone. Everyone returned to their desks, and I kept monitoring the situation. As noon approached, my anxiety grew. At 11:30, James disappeared from view. Asher, I'm here to babysit, Benjamin said, locking the door behind her. She was the only one who insisted on staying. We're all here for you, she reassured me. A few minutes later, James reappeared on screen, wearing the little black dress she'd mentioned on the phone. It looked incredible, but it wasn't something I wanted her wearing for anyone else. I knew she wasn't dressing up for me. She was doing it for someone else. Benjamin held my hand, her own trembling as we both watched. James was waiting for someone, and soon the first man arrived, the same one from before. They kissed passionately, and then another man entered, followed by a third and finally a fourth. All four finally made sense. I watched in disbelief as James kissed each man, one by one. They surrounded her, laughing and talking, and James stood at the center, clearly enjoying every bit of it. Benjamin whispered, "That one of the men is the same as the day before," and the word she used echoed in my mind, searing into me. We continued watching as James basked in the attention of her coworkers, enjoying the moment while my heart shattered into pieces. The four men took their seats, two on the couch, two in office chairs, facing James, who stood near the window. Then, she began dancing, swaying to music I couldn't hear. I had seen her dance like this before, just for me, but now it felt entirely different. She moved around the room, brushing her fingers across the men's shoulders, and instead of feeling excitement or passion, all I felt was dread. In the corner of the room, James slipped out of her halter top, letting the dress fall to the floor. Smiling, she made her way through the men, who eagerly reached out to touch her. Every time they did, I flinched. Benjamin squeezed my hand as James stood in the center of the room, smiling and running her hands over her own body, clearly relishing the attention. Tore me apart. Then they started having sex. "I can't take this," Benjamin whispered, her voice shaking. "It'll be over soon." She held me tight as I struggled to keep it together. I glanced back at the screen and saw James with each of the men, one after the other. Benjamin cried softly, offering me silent comfort as I watched the devastation unfold. Afterward, James picked up her dress, wiped herself down with a towel, and changed into her usual business attire, as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Our marriage was over. Despite the storm raging inside me, I remained eerily calm. Benjamin's quiet sobs brought me back to reality. "It's all over," I said quietly, the words barely escaping my lips. She asked me how I was holding up. "Not great, but better than the other day. I feel numb," I admitted, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "This weekend will be tough." What can I do to help? She asked, her concern palpable. I'm not going home, I said firmly, making a decision. I'm going to my dad's. He's always been the rational one. Maybe he can help me make sense of this. We're here for you. Just let us know what you need, she offered, her voice filled with warmth. Thanks, Benjamin. And please, thank everyone for me, I said, appreciating the support. Benjamin nodded and left the room a short while later. Ethan entered quietly, sitting down to continue his work at the computer. About half an hour passed before 4 pictures appeared on the large screen, accompanied by an organizational chart of James's company. These are the 4 guys, Ethan said, breaking the silence. They're all James's immediate supervisors, 2 levels below top management. I've got their personnel files and will be adding more details soon. It'll all be on your computer. I didn't respond. I just stared at the faces of the men who had been with my wife. I couldn't bring myself to blame them. Any man would want James, anyone but me. The truth was, I wasn't in my right mind anymore. Olivia was the last to leave. She stopped by to check on me and wished me well for the weekend. Once alone, the pain hit me with full force. Tears fell onto my desk, the weight of everything crashing down. I knew I had to get away. I muttered to myself. I watched James pack up her dress, then called home, leaving a message that I was going to my dad's. I called my dad next, and he immediately sensed something was wrong. Come on over, he told me. 15 minutes later, I was on the road. By Monday morning, I returned to the office with more clarity and energy than I'd had in days. My dad helped me process everything, and finally, I knew what I needed to do. Now, I just had to make it happen with the help of my team. Ava approached me as I was making coffee, her eyes filled with concern. You okay, boss? She asked, her voice soft. I'm okay. Thanks for asking, I said, trying to keep it together. Without a word, she hugged me tightly, her rings and studs pressing against my chest. I didn't mind. We pulled apart when Sophia appeared at the door, smiling as she walked me to my office. When Ethan arrived, I gathered the team together. We need a war council, I said, my tone resolute. Once everyone was in my office, I shared my plan. Guys, I've made a decision. With some guidance from my dad, I'm seeing a lawyer today to start the divorce process. I'll have the papers served at James's office during lunch, hopefully while she's in the middle of one of her trysts. Then, I'll call her and tell her that I've been watching everything. I'll give her a choice, me or her lovers. If she chooses me, she has to do 3 things. File a sexual harassment suit against her supervisors, resign from her job, and explain why she did this. If she agrees, I'll pause the divorce and see if we can work things out. But I'm not sure we can. If she refuses, I'll email videos of her actions to everyone in her company and send the videos to the wives of her supervisors. I know it's vindictive, but I need them to feel some of my pain. Now, I need all the spy equipment removed from here, and at my house pack up everything related to James separately for Olivia to hold. Ethan, can you help with the emails? If it comes to that, I already have it covered, boss. Just press a button. Thanks, Ethan. Let's keep it simple. I hope I don't have to use it, I added, but Ethan had one more thing to share. I found out more, he said, his tone serious. James started this with her boss, Ethan Taylor, after he mentioned a promotion. It looks like it began last October, and over time, other managers joined in, each getting a spot on her lunch schedule. She's not involved with anyone else, just these 4. I've copied everything to your computer. Also, she spent a quiet weekend at home, no activity with anyone else. Thanks, Ethan, I said, processing the overwhelming weight of the situation. I really appreciate all of you being here with me. They smiled back at me, their expressions full of quiet understanding. I gave a small nod in return, then took a deep breath. All right, let's get moving. I need that landmass audit report on my desk by 5 o'clock. I'm heading home this afternoon to grab some things, so someone needs to keep an eye on James and call me if she leaves. Benjamin and Olivia spoke in unison, both already on the same wavelength. No, Benjamin said, her tone firm. You're staying at our guest room. I've already changed the sheets. Once you get what you need from your house, you'll be staying with us.
No arguments.
I didn't even try to protest. All right, I'll call when I'm done, I said, feeling the weight of the decision settle in. The meeting ended, and everyone got to work. Ethan stayed at his station, fine-tuning the email setup, while Sophia and Ava carefully packed up the equipment, leaving just the telescope and monitor for when things would eventually escalate. Benjamin and Olivia sorted through the landmass paperwork, their faces revealing the grim reality. We weren't going to be able to save landmass from its financial collapse. I made the call to set up an appointment with a divorce lawyer for that afternoon. During lunch, Olivia handed me my phone while I was in Sophia's office, purposely avoiding the telescope and monitor. I've seen enough, Olivia said softly, her voice reluctant. Call James. We need to see if she reacts the same way as last time. With a deep breath, I dialed her office number. James answered, breathless. I hung up soon after, but my mind was already replaying painful images. Olivia confirmed. They got the video they needed. I stayed late Monday and Tuesday, avoiding James. At 12:15 p.m. on Wednesday, everything was set to unfold. I had prepped the final report for landmass, but left it untouched on my desk. Ethan, with a gleam in his eye, informed me that he could remotely unlock James's office door using the building's electronic lock system. He smiled with pride, clearly pleased with the progress. The morning had passed in an oppressive silence. After a quiet breakfast, we returned to my office at landmass. At noon, James's lover, Ethan, walked in. I watched as they began talking, the tension in my chest building as the minutes passed. The process server was supposed to arrive, and I kept worrying about the timing. But then things took an unexpected turn. The lovers scrambled to get dressed as a man in a suit entered. He handed James a large envelope before walking out without saying a word. James froze, looking down at the contents of the envelope. As she opened it, papers and photographs spilled out onto the floor. One photo captured the moment she flipped off the phone, while another exposed her in a compromising position with an older man. James rushed to the window, her face drained of color as she realized she was caught. I didn't waste a second. I called her office, my heart pounding in my ears. She hesitated before picking up, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Tell Ethan to leave," she said. "James," I replied, my voice colder than I intended. "You've got one shot to fix this." I paused, letting her absorb the gravity of my words. First, quit your job. Second, file a sexual harassment lawsuit against the 4 men at Enterprise. Third, explain to me why you did this. You have 5 minutes to start with the first step. I heard her sobbing, and I hovered over the enter key, ready to send the damning videos to everyone at Enterprise if she didn't comply. I waited, the silence unbearable, until I heard her voice crack on the other end of the line. "But Asher, I've invested so much in Enterprise. I'm going to..." I didn't let her finish. I pressed the button, ending the call before she could say anything else. "All right, everyone," I said, feeling oddly detached. "Let's pack up the rest of the equipment and head home. Take the rest of the day off. I've got a meeting with Benjamin at 2 o'clock to deliver the bad news. We'll reconvene tomorrow." I turned to the telescope one last time, but the screen displayed James, her face pressed against the window as she screamed. Ethan mercifully turned off the monitor, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the empty screen. Before I could react, my team, my accountants, my computer experts, my closest friends, came over and wrapped me in a tight embrace. They knew what had just happened, and they shared in my grief. In that moment, I felt more love and support than I ever thought possible. With them around me, I knew I could make it through anything. I let the tears fall, unable to hold them back any longer. "I've spent the last year ruining my life," I said quietly, the words slipping out without thought. "I ruined my marriage, my career, my sanity. There's no way to fix it, but I'm determined to try." A year ago, while I was with my boss, Ethan and I were caught completely off guard when a man walked into my office. I thought the door was locked. Ethan and I scrambled to get dressed, but the man simply smirked and handed me an envelope. "Madam, you are served." he said. That was the moment everything started falling apart. Since then, I've been living in a fog, haunted by the past and lost in the present. Only now, with the help of therapy, have I started to understand what went wrong. But I have to revisit all of it, the painful details, the choices I made, if I want to rebuild my life. As the flight attendant droned on with her usual instructions, I tuned her out, focused on trying to sort through my jumbled thoughts, hoping for clarity before landing. Where did it all begin? My therapist asks, her voice calm but probing. I know you want to focus on the events that led to your affair, but everything stems from your past. I nod, the weight of her question hanging in the air. It started long before that, but I can trace the turning point back to a Friday in October. I say, my voice quiet as memories flood back. It was a dreary Friday morning, one of those gray October days when the world feels like it's holding its breath. Ethan Taylor, my supervisor, called me into his office just before lunch. His usual warm smile didn't quite reach his eyes, but I thought nothing of it at the time. "Close the door," he asked casually. After 8 years of working under him, I was taken aback when he told me I was his top choice to replace Ava Jones, the retiring logistics supervisor. I was elated and eager to prove myself. I asked what I could do to secure the promotion. Ethan suggested we discuss it over lunch at a fancy Boston restaurant the following Wednesday. I agreed, excited at the prospect of advancing in my career. Over wine, he asked me about my life, my ambitions, my dreams. But then his tone shifted. Leaning in, he asked, "What are you willing to do for my recommendation?" The question caught me off guard, but I tried to stay professional. "I work hard," I said, forcing myself to maintain composure. But Ethan's smile told me he was suggesting something else. It wasn't until later, back at my office, that I understood what he meant. Sex. The realization gnawed at me all weekend. I wrestled with the idea, trying to convince myself it was just a small compromise for my career, that I could separate work and personal life. By Monday, I convinced myself it was the price I had to pay. I went to Ethan and asked point blank, "Did you mean sex by anything?" He didn't hesitate. He smiled, confirming my suspicion. But I set conditions. It would happen at work, during lunch, no one else would know, and it would end when I said so. Ethan agreed, and that was the beginning. Our first time together was awkward, filled with nervous fumbling. It was nothing like I had imagined. Afterward, I cried, the first time since I'd gotten married. But I justified it. I told myself it was all for the greater good, my career, my future. I even told myself my marriage was already in trouble. It was a lie I told to make myself feel better. Over time, the affair became a routine. One afternoon, while Ethan and I were together, Asher called. I rushed the conversation, flipping off the phone afterward, lying to Ethan that Asher and I were struggling. Then Ava found out. He threatened to expose us unless he was allowed to join our secret meetings. I had no choice but to comply. Now I had 2 lovers at work. Soon after, Ava, with his charm and manipulations, roped in Asher, another manager, and the affair expanded. By January, I had 3 lovers. Every week, I dreaded the looming Tuesday, but when Asher arrived that week, I realized I wanted him more than I had expected. Afterward, the guilt overwhelmed me. I couldn't even look him in the eye. "Did I hurt you?" Asher asked, concerned. I forced a smile. "No, I'm fine," I lied, my throat tightening as tears welled up. By Wednesday, it was Ethan again, and Thursday was for Ava. Then one Friday, all 3 showed up at once, and I entertained them simultaneously. I didn't care anymore. Everyone knew, except for Asher Davis, the last manager. That changed when he walked in one Monday, expecting the same treatment. Now I had 4 lovers. Later that evening, Asher texted me. He was going to his father's for the weekend. I barely registered the message. Dinner, TV, and a sense of loss consumed me. Without Asher, it felt like a part of me was missing. Before bed, I took a bubble bath, closing my eyes, trying to hold on to the fantasy of what I once had with him. But everything came crashing down on Wednesday. Ethan and I had just sat down for a meeting when a man in a cheap suit walked into the room. I locked the door, I said, panic rising as I scrambled to cover up. The man smirked. What do you want? I demanded, Are you James Wilson? Yes, he replied unfazed. And you are. He handed me a manila envelope. I froze before taking it from him. Madam, you are served, he said before leaving. I collapsed, shaking as I opened the envelope. A divorce petition was on top, the words too surreal to process. Ethan asked what it was, but I couldn't respond. Then I saw the photos of me with Ava. The reality hit me like a sledgehammer. How did he get these? I muttered, staring out the window. Across the street, I saw another building, and then it clicked. Someone had been watching me. The panic set in, and I pressed my hands against the glass as if it could stop the world from unraveling. The phone rang. Tell Ethan to leave, Asher's voice growled through the receiver. Ethan, go away. I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ethan hesitated, sensing the gravity, but I snapped, just go. He knows everything. After Ethan left, I waited, trembling, for Asher's next words. James? His voice was like ice. You have one chance to save everything. Understand? Yes, I sobbed. Quit your job, file sexual harassment suits, and explain why. You have 5 minutes to start. I hesitated. Desperation filled my voice as I said, I've invested so much in Enterprise. I'm about to be the first female manager. But the line went dead. Screaming, I looked out the window, realizing I had ruined everything. Asher was leaving me. My world collapsed. What have I done? I wailed in despair. The knock at the door interrupted my breakdown. Ava stood there, glaring. The whole office is watching, he spat. You filthy liar. Then he slapped me hard, knocking me to the floor. Tom and Ethan quickly pulled him away. A coworker sneered. Now I'm sure to get the promotion. Everyone knew. Couldn't breathe. I tried calling Asher again and again, but he wouldn't answer. Then I saw the email. Desperately, I opened it, hoping it was from Asher. It wasn't. It was a video of me with Ethan. As it ended, the words, "That's all, folks," flashed across the screen. Collapsed, sobbing. Security came in, gave me an hour to pack, and handed me my termination letter. I packed my things in a haze, realizing that 9 years at Enterprise had been erased in an instant. My career was gone. But more than that, I had lost Asher. When I got home, I hoped to talk to him, but there was only a note. James, don't contact me. Call my lawyer, sign the divorce papers, and let's end this quickly. You've done enough damage. I cried for days. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences, not infidelity. A week after leaving Enterprise, I was contacted by a lawyer about a sexual harassment suit against the company. Somehow, he had all the evidence, and I suspected Asher was behind it. The lawsuit was settled for $100,000. Enterprise fired 3 managers, and Ava retired. Afterward, I called Asher's lawyer, asking when we could talk. His response was cold. Why did you flip? I hung up the phone, frustrated. I called again, but each time he repeated the same question until I gave up. A month later, I called my cousin in Cincinnati, desperate for some escape. She invited me to move in with her, and after a week of agonizing over the decision, I signed the divorce papers, packed my things, and left most of my belongings for Asher. I left a note asking him to call me, but he never did. In Cincinnati, I sank into a deep depression. I lost myself, drowning in guilt and regret. One night, overwhelmed by the weight of everything, I tried to end my life. My cousin found me and called for help. The paramedics rushed me to the hospital, and it was there, amidst the sterile white walls, that I began therapy. Slowly, painfully, I started to come to terms with my actions. I realized I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. Maybe even somehow get Asher back. My therapist helped me create a plan to understand why I had done what I did and how I could rebuild my life. But even he warned me that getting Asher back might not be possible. For months after leaving Boston, I received the final divorce papers. The settlement awarded me $100,000, but no alimony or stake in Asher's business. We agreed to sell the house and split the profits. 2 months into therapy, I still felt like I was standing amidst the rubble of my old life. As I boarded the plane back to Boston, my mind was a swirl of contradictions. I knew I had made enormous mistakes, but I also recognized how far I had come in understanding them. I hoped Asher would listen to my story, though I knew deep down that was a long shot. The flight seemed endless. As we neared landing, I kept wishing for some kind of miracle, but I knew better. I had to face reality. The captain's announcement jolted me out of my thoughts as I realized I had been crying. The woman sitting beside me handed me a tissue and said softly, "Whatever troubles we have, God watches over us. Just talk to him." As the plane touched down, I reflected on everything again. I had hoped for clarity, but nothing had changed. I'm a liar, a cheat, and I've ruined lives all because I wanted to feel important, I thought. Now I'm nobody. My name is James Williams. Losing my married name hurt more than I had expected. I didn't want alimony, a condo, or savings. I only wanted Asher, but that was no longer possible. I rented a car and drove toward Walham, where our old home had been. The drive felt like a long, winding path, and when I finally arrived, I couldn't move. I sat in the car, paralyzed with fear and uncertainty. I had rehearsed what I would say to Asher. "Hi, Asher. I'm here to apologize. Can we talk?" But when I stood in front of the door, I could barely remember the words. Everything looked the same except for the spots in the yard where I had planted flowers. I rang the doorbell, heart racing. A tall man opened the door. "Yes?" he asked, his face puzzled. My stomach dropped. "Where's Asher?" I blurted out. Another man appeared, wearing a robe and looking equally confused. "Can we help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for Asher Wilson," I said, almost pleading. "Mr. Wilson moved 6 months ago," the second man replied, his tone apologetic. I stood there, speechless. I'm his wife," I finally stammered, my voice shaking. "Well, I used to be. I came to talk," I added, hoping they would understand. The men exchanged uneasy looks. "We've heard about you," one of them said softly, almost apologetically. They offered me coffee, but I declined, asking if they knew Asher's new address. They didn't. I thanked them and left, my heart heavy with disappointment. As I walked back to my car, another tear fell. I didn't know where to go. On a whim, I drove to a small restaurant Asher and I used to visit, hoping for some sign, some clue as to where he might be. I sat alone, drinking coffee, lost in thought. As I finished my drink, I decided to check Asher's office. I drove downtown, feeling the weight of everything pressing on me. Passing my old workplace brought up painful memories. The legal meetings, the lawsuit, the affair, the destruction of everything. I parked near Asher's office and entered the building, a mixture of dread and hope in my chest. The security guard gave me a look of mild recognition. "I don't think he's here," the guard said, his tone neutral. "But you can check." I walked up to Asher's office door. It was locked, and the lights were off. The door now read Wilson and Associates, no longer M. Wilson CPA. A strange feeling of finality washed over me. I walked back to the car, lost in thought. I couldn't bear the idea of just driving away without knowing where Asher was. I decided to contact one of Asher's employees, Benjamin. I still had her as an emergency contact. I entered her address into my GPS and drove toward her home. When I arrived, a young girl in a soccer uniform answered the door and called for her mom. After a moment, Benjamin appeared, her eyes narrowed with obvious anger. "What do you want?" she asked, cold and distant. I took a deep breath, fighting the tears. "I'm looking for Asher. I came to apologize, to talk to him. Do you have his new address?" Benjamin's eyes flared with anger. "Yes, but I'll never give it to you," she snapped. "You've caused enough pain. Asher's moved on. You're just a bad memory now. Leave." The door slammed shut in my face. All hope drained from me as I stood there, the weight of her words sinking in. I stumbled to my car, tears flowing uncontrollably. I had to pull over into a fast food parking lot, desperate to collect myself. An older man tapped on my window, asking if I was okay. I nodded, barely able to speak. I remembered Asher's father and drove to his house, hoping to find some answers. When I arrived, I saw a for sale sign on the lawn. The house was empty. Desperate, I spoke to a neighbor who told me Asher's father had passed away 3 months ago. Crushed, I drove to the cemetery where Asher's father was buried. There, I found a fresh inscription on his headstone, with a basket of flowers from Asher and his sister. A florist's card was attached, and I decided to stop by the shop, hoping it might be my last chance to find Asher. At the florist, a young man politely refused to give me any customer information. I didn't give up. Desperate, I offered him a $100 bill. After a brief hesitation, he wrote down Asher's address, asking me not to mention where I had gotten it. I followed the GPS, my heart pounding as I neared the house. The white bungalow stood quietly at the end of a cul-de-sac. The mailbox confirmed it was Asher's place, but no one was home. I waited on the porch, letting the silence engulf me. As I wandered around the house, I saw traces of Asher, plants we'd shared, a sundial with his favorite quote. But it wasn't our life anymore. This was his new life. I walked to a nearby park and sat at a turtle-shaped table, overwhelmed by grief. The life we had once planned together seemed so distant now. I broke down, crying bitterly, realizing that life without Asher wasn't worth living. Just then, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned, and there he was, Asher standing right behind me, his hand gently resting on my shoulder. I jumped up, sobbing uncontrollably. I kept repeating his name, telling him how much I missed him, how much I loved him. He held me as I cried, but nearby, Benjamin, Olivia, and another woman watched, their expressions cold and unmoving. "Hi, James," Asher said softly, his voice calm but distant. "Would you like to come in?" I clung to him, needing the comfort more than anything, and he gently guided me back inside. Once inside, he suggested, "Why don't you freshen up in the bathroom?" His tone was kind, but there was a heaviness in the air. I nodded and made my way to the bathroom, washing my face, trying to compose myself. When I emerged, Asher was waiting, standing at the threshold of the living room, his eyes soft yet unreadable. "Let's go out onto the deck," he said quietly. "We need to talk." As we passed through the kitchen, I noticed the women busying themselves with food, stealing glances at us in silence. The tension between us was palpable. We stepped outside, and I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me. We sat down, the world seeming to stand still. For what felt like an eternity, neither of us spoke. Finally, Asher broke the silence, his voice low and hesitant. "How have you been, James?" "Better now, Asher," I said, my voice trembling as I tried to steady myself. "How about you?" "I'm doing all right," he replied, his gaze intense. "But I don't think you came here for small talk. Tell me what's been going on since everything fell apart." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. "Asher, I don't know how much you know, but I'll tell you everything. The sexual harassment case against Enterprise settled out of court, and I used the money to start over in Cincinnati. I'm working for a software company now. It's a good job, but it's not the same." I paused, gathering my thoughts, but Asher remained silent, listening intently. I could feel the burn of his scrutiny, but I pushed on. "I've been seeing a psychologist since I left Boston," I continued. "He's helped me see that everything that happened was my fault. You didn't deserve any of it. I'm the one to blame." My voice caught in my throat, but I pressed on, trying to steady myself. "I know I've apologized before, but I mean it now more than ever. I'm so sorry, Asher, for everything." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I fought to hold them back. "I was a mess when you found out. I even tried to end my life once. But my therapist helped me see that it wasn't about hurting you. It was a desperate act to escape the mess I'd created. I didn't want to hurt you, but I did." Asher's face softened, but there was still a guarded look in his eyes. "I get it," he said slowly, his voice cracking with emotion. I wasn't exactly making the best choices either. My low self-esteem led me to believe that sleeping with Ethan would guarantee a promotion. I didn't realize I was already recommended for the job. It spiraled from there, and I made choices I'll never be able to undo. Asher shifted in his chair but didn't speak. I took a moment, feeling the weight of the words I had to say. "I'm not making excuses," I said, my voice hoarse. "I wasn't coerced. I chose to do it. And when you sent that email, I realized how deeply I had hurt you. I would have accepted any punishment if it meant you would just listen to my apology." I struggled to gather my thoughts, taking a deep breath. I destroyed the lives of those men, their families, just like I destroyed ours. All because I wanted that promotion. The lies I told you were hateful. And for that, I'm deeply sorry. I understand if you can never trust me again. But I'll live with that. I just need you to know that I was wrong. I will always be sorry. I paused again, trying to steady myself. The tears started to fall as I choked out the next part. "I need you to know something. The sex with those men meant nothing. It was just sex. But being with you was love. You were always the only one I loved. The past year without you has been hell. I'd do anything to make things right. Whatever it takes. Just let me back into your life. Asher. Please. I love you." I broke down, unable to continue. Asher sat silently, giving me the space I needed to regain some semblance of control. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I wasn't supposed to cry. Asher, I'm so sorry about your father. He was a great man, and I paid my respects at his grave. That's how I found your address. If you can find it in your heart, please forgive me. If there's anything left between us, please let me come back. I want to be with you again. I love you." I covered my face with my hands, allowing the tears to flow freely. Asher said nothing for a long time, and I couldn't bring myself to look at him. I was too afraid of what his silence meant. Just then, Olivia appeared at the door. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Dinner's ready if you want to eat." Asher glanced at me with a soft look, then turned back to her. "Thanks, Olivia. We'll be right there." He turned to me, his expression gentle but cautious. "Do you want to take a break? We can get something to eat if you'd like." "I'd like to clean up first," I replied, wiping away another tear. Asher led me to the bathroom. After I freshened up, we made our way to the dining room. The others were already seated. 5 people in total, all watching me with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment. The dinner table was heavy with tension, and I could barely taste the food as I nervously picked at my plate. Asher sat across from me, his expression unreadable. The meal passed in silence, the awkwardness suffocating. After dinner, the tension only grew. Benjamin and Olivia cornered me by the fridge. Benjamin's eyes were hard, filled with barely contained rage. "I want you gone as soon as you're done," she spat. "If you hurt him, I'll make sure you regret it." Olivia stood beside her, her voice low and threatening. "If he sheds a tear because of you, I'll make you pay. He's moved on. Leave him alone." The others stood by, watching, silent witnesses to my downfall. I felt trapped, but I knew I had to stay, if only for Asher. And then he appeared, rescuing me from their stares. "James," he said, his voice calm. "Let's finish our talk outside." I followed him, relieved to escape the hostility. Once outside, we sat back down on the deck, the air between us thick with unspoken words. "James," Asher began, his voice steady but serious. "I appreciate your honesty today. I can sense a change in you, but I need an honest answer to one question. After that, we can talk about us." I braced myself for the question I knew was coming. "Okay," I whispered. Asher looked directly at me, his gaze unwavering. "Why did you give me the finger after our call when you were with those guys?" My heart sank. I had been dreading this moment. "Asher, I've done so many stupid things, but that was the worst. I convinced myself and the man I was with that you were a bad husband. I lied to justify what I was doing. It was all a lie, and I'm so sorry you ever saw it." Asher nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. I believe you're being honest, but that act of disrespect hurt more than anything else. I don't know if I'll ever get past what you did. His words crushed me. Is that why you wouldn't talk to me? I asked softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Asher nodded slowly. Partly, he admitted. I was so angry. I didn't want to hurt either of us more. It took my friends a long time to get me to this point. We both sat in silence for a moment, just breathing, processing everything we had said. Finally, Asher spoke again, his voice softer now. Okay, James, I'll give you the short version of my life over the last year. I listened closely as he began to share his side of the story. When I hit send on those emails with the videos of you and your lovers, I was furious, angrier than I'd ever been. I felt like I could eliminate someone, even you, he said, his tone blunt. On the outside, I seemed calm, but inside, I was a volcano. I wanted to hurt you, to destroy everything you cared about, including me. Asher paused, staring down at his hands. I could see the pain in his eyes as he continued. I wanted you to feel the same pain I did, sending those emails to your supervisors. It was my way of getting back at the men who took you from me, who helped ruin our marriage. I blamed you, but I blamed them too. Everyone paid for it, including me. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. After that, I got threatening calls and emails, some from your coworkers, and some from friends of the men you were with. I tried apologizing to their wives, but they were too hurt to listen. One of them even spit in my face. Still, they used the footage in their divorce cases. Asher looked at me now, his expression raw. I stayed at my dad's for a while, trying to get my head straight. He helped me calm down, but eventually, I had to deal with everything on my own. By the time I came back, you were gone. I didn't try to find you or call. I was glad you were gone, even though it left a huge hole inside me. His voice softened as he spoke again, more quietly now. I cried for days after you left. My friends staged an intervention. Benjamin and Olivia practically mothered me. Sophia made sure I ate, exercised, and kept up with work. Even Ava tried to push me out of my comfort zone. Ethan brought over DVDs and beer, and we had a guy weekend. It helped. After 3 months of wallowing in self-pity, I finally started living again. I sold our condo after you signed the divorce papers. Took a while, but by then I was already living here. Moving here was a fresh start, something I really needed. He paused for a moment, his gaze steady on mine. When I got the final divorce notice, I almost slipped back into depression. But Sophia helped me stay on track. Asher's expression turned grim as he added, "Oh, and I should tell you that your video ended up on an amateur site. Ethan found it, but I didn't post it. I'm sorry it got out. I'll give you the URL." He sighed again, his shoulders heavy. "I put your share of the condo sale, $22,000, in the bank. I'll write you a check tonight. I didn't send it before because I didn't want to face you." Asher looked me in the eye, his expression unreadable. "Now, you asked me to forgive you." "I forgive you," I said softly, my voice shaky. "Not for your sake, but for mine. I can't carry this hate anymore. But I don't love you anymore, either." His words hit harder than I expected. "Forgiving you doesn't mean forgetting," he said, his voice barely audible. "What I saw in those videos, it destroyed every good memory we had, our hopes, our dreams, everything. It's gone. I've let go of the hate, but I'm also done with love. I'm moving on, James. There won't be a Mrs. Asher Wilson with your name." The air around me thickened, and I felt the weight of his words settling over me like a blanket of cold, suffocating reality. I sat there, devastated, tears streaming down my face. My life as I had known it was over. Asher handed me a tissue but didn't speak. After a long silence, he left me alone to gather myself. When I finally looked up, I saw him in the kitchen, surrounded by his friends. A young woman, her hair tied in a ponytail, leaned her head on his shoulder, and I understood then. He had moved on. I cried for what felt like hours, the pain and regret consuming me. It was dark by the time I managed to pull myself together. I had to leave. Asher handed me an envelope with my share of the condo sale and the video URL on the back. Just like that, it was over, I thought bitterly. My hopes of getting him back were gone, along with the last shred of my self-respect. I had to start over without him. Asher walked me to my car, and for a brief moment, I held his hand, the touch lingering. I whispered, "Goodbye," and kissed his cheek. But when I opened the car door, something made me look back. What I saw shattered me. Asher stood there with his arm around the young woman's waist, and his friends were behind him. Each of them had their middle fingers raised toward me. The message was clear: screw off. In that instant, I realized the full extent of Asher's pain, and I understood, for the first time, just how much I had destroyed.